click on the options category here. The Scout Rec is a good example for doing the options because there's just a lot of options that have been added in over the years. So what I would encourage you to do is go through and add in, check each of these options, make sure that if you wanted to change any of these, you could toggle these to yes or no, or just change whichever option. If there's ever something in the report that you wonder about, hey, is this possible, or am I missing something, just give us a call and we can help guide you to the correct option. But for now, what I want to do is just point out a couple of the common options that are changed, and then kind of show what that would change in the report. Okay, so one of the things right here in the scouting data section, there's a few options that are frequently used. One is to change the way that crop observations or field conditions are displayed. So by default, it's in a table format. If I go into my print preview, kind of see what that looks like. So it just each row and column in that crop observation section has a data field and then the reading. Data field. Okay. If I go back into options, and instead I want to make that more condensed, I want to save the pages that I'm printing, I can click on this option, and let's say I want it in a condensed format. Okay? Let me do the same for the field condition. All right? When I click on Print Preview, I'll see that these things took up one line instead of two. And when you're doing a report across 10, 20 fields at a time for a grower, that's going to save a fairly significant amount of space in the overall report. Might save you a few pages from printing. Okay. Another option here is if you wanted to include the blank values, so not just the ones that I have entered, but the ones that I actually didn't enter can be included here as well. So, and this might be if this is a report where you're giving to the grower, just so he knows the other things that you kind of looked at or worried about, and maybe those are going to be filled in just on the printed page later on. Okay, now, I would say that's less likely to be used as opposed to the table format or the normal condensed. Okay, including patch edge densities, pest edge and pest patch densities is another option here. So when you're entering in pest information, you can include the average, the edge density, and the patch density. If you had entered that in, you can turn this to yes if you want that displayed to the grower. Including the field border sketch, another very common one. Now, this would be used if you want to show the field border on every field. Okay, so if I turn this to yes, I go back to print preview, I'm going to see field border over here on the right side on every single field. Now by default, this is set to no. It's set to only if sketch exists, which means that if there was an actual sketch drawn, like there was here, where I drew a weed patch, marked it, colored it, okay, that would be included in the report, but any of these other field borders with no additional drawing, those would not be included. Okay, so that's a very commonly used one. And sometimes if you want to, again, save pages, you can turn that to no so that space is never used for a field border. Kind of save it for something else. Okay, and then on the recommendation side here, there's additional information you can include. So for example, an amount needed as far as the rate units, meaning the rate entered into the journal entry, the product units, meaning the actual product units in terms of what was set as the typical purchase unit. So if it was typically purchased in gallons, that was set in the pick list. That's what the product units would be. Sometimes you'd include both units. You can include the price or the treatment cost if you have that entered in. And then down here, if you need to have the EPA number in there, you can click on Product List Table, turn this to Yes, and then it's going to include essentially the EPA number and restriction information in that report. So if I go back to my print preview, be able to see what we did there. So I had changed a few things on the recommendation down here. So I included the amount needed, okay, and this is in terms of the actual rate unit. So this is equal to the pint. I used pints in the rate, so the amount needed is shown in rates in this column, in pints in this column. The amount needed in terms of the product units, which I have set for gallons in each of these chemicals. So essentially this is translated from the pints into the gallons. How many gallons of the product do I need? And then here's the cost per acre, which I have entered for just a couple of the chemicals. All right. Okay. Now the next thing is selecting the categories. This is used in any report where you're pulling treatment information or recommendation information. This is just simply if you only want to show certain chemical types in your report, you would uncheck the other ones. So if you only wanted to see the herbicides, you would just check mark the herbicide.